Good morning, folks. Heath Esslinger here from FCA Wrestling and A Better Way Athletics. We're so glad you're tuning in this morning, pumped up about this morning's topic. We posted a question on Instagram last week under A Better Way Athletics. Kudos to my guy, Chad Pike, for getting that stuff done. But we posted this question on Instagram last week, and we got a good response. Why are great teammates so hard to come by today? And there were all sorts of response, selfishness, all this different stuff. And then after that question was posted on Instagram, if you've ever seen the movie Dumb and Dumber, here's the scenario. He pulls up on the scooter, and his buddy says, as soon as I think you can't do anything dumber, you go and totally redeem yourself. Here's what happened on Saturday night in regards to this question. Jalen Hurts redeems the sports world when it comes to being a great teammate. This guy comes off the bench after sitting an entire year, being pulled in last year's national championship game, and he redeems the sports world, and we go crazy. I mean, the sports world is going crazy about what Jalen Hurts has accomplished and chosen and persevered through over the last year at the University of Alabama. And I want to say kudos to Jalen Hurts. It's unbelievable. But it's crazy to think. Let's pause for a moment. Pause done. It's crazy to think about that what should be expected in the sports world. What Jalen Hurts did, it should be expected. Hey, you get benched. Another player's a great player. He comes in. You keep doing your thing. If your number gets called again, you step up to the plate. But it's crazy to think that what should be expected is now applauded. Jalen Hurts is a hero, an absolute hero in the sports world this week, in essence, for doing exactly what a great teammate should do. Listen, Jalen Hurts is a hero for doing exactly what a great teammate should do. And I want to say this, man. I am so impressed because it is going against the grain of what we normally see in college athletics, in high school athletics, in middle school athletics, and newsflash, it's going against the grain for what we see in youth sports. Because when we don't get our way at 7 years old, we usually transfer. So in an interview with Jalen Hurts a year earlier in a hotel room crying with his parents. I mean, this guy that's now a hero, he's in a hotel room with his mom and dad because they care about him. And he's crying and he's contemplating and he's wrestling with and he's struggling with. I just got pulled in a national championship game. An elite player who I have the utmost respect for comes in, wins the game for him. He knows, hey, my number might not be called again. He's in this hotel room crying with his parents, and he looks at his dad and he says this. He asked his dad, hey, what are we going to do now? And the hero of the story steps in. The hero of the story steps in, and his dad says this. He says, we're going to fight. And here's what they did. They not only fought, they fought with the right weapons. They fought for the right reasons. And guess what? They reaped a reward that I don't believe, even if he would have been the starter, he would have reaped that reward over the last year. So Jalen went on to say he has fought for a whole year for this opportunity. So the real story, the real hero in the story, maybe it's not Jalen Hurts. Maybe the real hero in the story, I would say, are his parents. So to Mr. and Miss Hurts, wherever you are out there, from this guy in Cleveland, Tennessee, who got to coach at the Division I level and who wants to make a positive difference in the sports world, kudos to you for being strong enough to understand and realize that your son was going to be okay and there was something good coming out of this. I am so grateful for parents like you. I want to model my parenting after you. So I'd say it's his parents who had the resolve to back what was right over what was easy. They're the real heroes in the story. So we look at Jalen Hurts. We celebrate it. Every parent in the world's talking about it, yet we don't do it. Every coach in the world's celebrating, yet we don't cultivate it. So how in the world, what are some principles we can have in our lives to maybe cultivate great teammates? I was literally sitting at a restaurant this morning working on some things for this summer, and a coach came up and was telling me about how they win this big game, and then the only thing they receive are text messages after the game talking about how parents are frustrated their son or daughter didn't get such and such a playing time. How about just celebrate the game? So I'm going to give you some principles this morning. These aren't the only principles. There's so many more, and there's experts out there that have some great things. But if we believe what Jalen Hurts did is to be applauded, and that is the example of what sports should be teaching and producing and things like that, then I want to give you a couple of principles to cultivate what I would consider a great teammate. Here's the first one. Parents, teach them to work hard, not to earn playing time, but to work hard because it's simply the right thing to do. We don't work hard simply to earn playing time. We work hard because it's the right thing to do. It's who we are. It's the character. It's our resolve. Put us in any situation, we're going to work hard, not because we get an extrinsic reward. We're going to work hard because it's who we are. So principle number one, teach them. That means we have to do things to cultivate this. Teach them to work hard, not just to earn playing time, but because it's the right thing to do. Show me a kid who his work ethic, like Jalen Hurts, remains the same, whether he's the guy or not, or the girl or not. I'll show you someone that's going to be successful in the long haul, whether it be in athletics or not. Here's the second thing. You ready? This is hard. It's hard for me. I'll be honest. I'm selfish, very, very selfish. Celebrate the success of others. Celebrate the success of others. This is a learned behavior. It doesn't just happen. I have 4 children. Let's just make fun of my kids. They're selfish. They were born selfish. I have to spank it out of them. I mean, they are just that way. I'm that way as a human. We're selfish. We have to learn a different behavior. How do we do that? We celebrate the success of others. Parents, make sure after games you are modeling this as well. If all we talk about with our children after the games is their playing time, then here's what we say we value. It's their playing time. So if we love what Jalen Hurts did, I would love for my son or daughter to be that one day. Well, if that's what I want them to be, that's the end goal, then I have to produce and work on those things with them. So after games, be quiet about the playing time. If someone else got great playing time, then celebrate the success of that child, and your child will begin to see, hey, it's not all about me. There's a bigger picture here, and I am that kid that others are talking about at times too. So principle number 2, celebrate the success of others. Principle number 3, coaches, celebrate athletes who are great teammates, not just the producers and the point scorers. Can I tell you how hard this is? Because here's what coaches get graded on. We get graded on wins and losses, but we have to grade ourselves on more. I talk a lot about, shout out to 3-dimensional coaching. I learned this 7 years ago from a guy named Mark Hull. The great in sport is the evaluation of what we do. That's great. The good in sport is the essence of what we do. It is super hard when you're feeling that pressure to evaluate those things that are good. I had a coach tell me last year, she said, Heath, you just can't measure those things that you're talking about. They're really hard. I said, no, they're not hard to measure if you value them. You can measure teammates helping each other up off the floor. You can measure whether or not a girl's looking behind the bench, looking at her parents. You can measure when someone pouts on the side of a bench. You can measure all those things if you value them. You know how hard assists are to measure in basketball? It's really hard. You got to have someone sitting over there charting free throws, really hard. But you know why we value it? Because it helps us win. Well, let's redefine the win, and let's say, hey, our win is producing young men and women like Jalen Hurts who will do what's right no matter the circumstances. So let's value the things that produce that. So coaches, we have to celebrate athletes who are great teammates, even if they're not the producers or the point scorers. Number 4, begin this process early. Begin this process earlier. It's much easier to teach a behavior early than modify or change a behavior late. I had a basketball coach. He's now the head coach at UMass. Shout out to Matt McCall at UMass. Matt McCall asked me one time, he said, listen, they're just so selfish. Like everyone is so self-absorbed. And I said, here's why. Because all we've taught them is to be selfish. I mean, at 6 and 7 years old, when you're getting private hitting lessons and you're getting private shooting lessons and you have your own strength coach and you have all these different things, then what the sport world is telling you is it's all about you. Well, if you do that for 10, 11, 12 years, it's not like all of a sudden you're going to enter onto this team and go, hey, it's not about me anymore. I'm just here to serve the team. It's not going to happen. You've learned a bad behavior and now someone has to try to correct that behavior. Let's take sport out of it. You're just a selfish human being that we don't want to be around people like that. So what we want to do is, if we want to cultivate great teammates, we got to begin this process earlier. Again, it's much easier to teach a behavior earlier than to modify or change a bad behavior later. So if we want great teammates, let's cultivate an attitude of great teammates early on. Next one. Don't let playing time, position, and potential scholarship drive your behavior and decisions. Parents, coaches, athletes, don't let playing time, position, and potential scholarship drive your behavior and decisions. First of all, you're probably not going to get a scholarship. Let's look at the statistics, okay? If you do, it was probably God's design for your life anyway. So don't let those things drive your behavior and your decisions. You've got to let purpose, mission, what I call long haul attributes drive your decisions. Here's what's awesome about Jalen Hurts. We're celebrating it because we look at that and go, what a mature, selfless young man he is to be able to do that. You know what I want to be said about my children? Those things. I don't want it to be said they were a starter on a certain team. They probably picked their parents wrong to even have that. But listen, I want those things to be said of them. Well, if that's the case, then I have to value those things. Here's the last thing. Build self-awareness, not a critical spirit. Build self-awareness, not a critical spirit. I will often ask young people when I'm coaching in a room, I'll ask them, who's the greatest coach in their life? And the response is them. The greatest coach in your life is you. The person you stare at in the mirror is the only person that can really tell you what's going on and where the deficiencies are. You can blame someone else. You can point the blame elsewhere, but at the end of the day, the person that you look at in the mirror is the person who can make the greatest adjustments for you to be great. So, man, if we're going to cultivate great teammates, we have to put effort into this. If we want more Jalen Hurts and less of, I'm not going to name names, and less of others, then we have to make sure that we have a strategy to cultivate those sorts of things. So I love this book. In the book, 7 Men, shout out Gina Allison bought this for me after speaking at an event at Cleveland High School. In the book, 7 Men by Eric Metaxas, a guy named William Wilberforce. I love this book because it takes these men and it breaks them down in these short little chapters. That's good for my ADD mindset. But William Wilberforce says this. He says, when my life changed, when he had an encounter with Christ, he calls it the Great Exchange. All right. When the direction of his life changed, he called it the Great Exchange. And he says this in this book. This is such a great statement. And it's what Jalen Hurts did for the sports world on Saturday night with every sports fan in the world watching and a lot of other normal people. William Wilberforce said this. He said, my goal, my aim is to make good fashionable. I want to make good fashionable. Here's what Jalen Hurts did on Saturday night in the sports world. He made good fashionable. Not great. He made good. The essence of what sports is supposed to teach, he made good fashionable. Jalen Hurts did this on Saturday night. As parents, coaches, and athletes, let's determine. We've got to resolve. We've got to make a decision that we're going to make good fashionable in our walks of life. We've got to do it. And if we're going to do that, we've got to take some of these things. We've got to apply them to our lives. We got to hold ourselves accountable to these things, because here's what I know. When you get in the car with your kid and they got benched or whatever, you love your kid so much, you really want to go to bat for them and maybe even call out someone else. You've got to protect yourself from doing that, because you see the future result of not doing it and what it produces. So we want those Jalen Hurts type young people. So, man, coaches, let me challenge you. Man, coach them hard, but love them harder. Parents, I know this is so stinking hard. I'm dealing with it. I'm walking through it. I got 4 of my own. All my friends have kids this age. We talk about it every day. My brother actually even sent me an email this morning and said, hey, how should I handle this situation that's going on? Listen, coaches, coach them hard, love them harder. Parents, man, don't be their agent, okay? Don't be going to bat for their playing time. Be training them up for their ultimate purpose, so that one day if they get put on the bench, they'd be willing to work just as hard for an entire year, waiting for their number to be called, so that they could be heroic in a moment like Jalen Hurts did on Saturday night. Don't be their agent, and always, always, always let them know how much you love to watch them play. Or in some cases, let them know how proud you are that they simply chose to wait. Man, thanks for tuning in this week. Go to A Better Way Athletics. Go to FCA Wrestling. I am pumped up about what God's doing in the athletic world. We'll see you guys next week.